Welcome to The Power and the Pain, where your past isn't your prison.
It's the fuel for your purpose.
I'm Greg Pease, combat veteran, NLP trainer, and your guide to turn trauma into triumph. This is The Power and the Pain. Let's go. Welcome back to The Power and the Pain. Today we bring on a special guest, as I do frequently. This week's guest I was connected with in kind of a unique way. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This week's guest is a best-selling author and a very soon TEDx speaker at TEDx Murfreesboro, March 12th. Christina, that's coming up pretty quick. Are you excited about your TEDx?
I am excited. I want to keep the feeling of excitement so that it doesn't go into nervousness. So we're going to say excited.
Absolutely, because this is Christina's first TEDx, which I'm sure I haven't even TEDx spoke yet. I can only imagine the excitement you have getting to be on that stage. Christina, take our listeners back a little bit. Now they know you're about to be a TEDx speaker, best-selling author. Take us back. Your message is rooted in helping people process, heal, and even utilize their trauma. Can you take our listeners back? Like, where does this come from for you?
Yeah, I'll give you a lot of life in a short amount of time. So I did have an abusive father in my childhood. So he was verbally abusive. And so I didn't learn good communication skills as a child. And then I came into a marriage very young at 22. And I knew that I loved my husband and we were best friends and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him, but I did not have those communication skills to really tell him what I needed or wanted. And then at the age of 25, when I was about 6 months pregnant with our first child, we found out that we carried a very rare gene. And our first daughter only lived for 3 days. It is a recessive gene, so they never discouraged us from getting pregnant again. We had a 75% chance of having a healthy baby. I'm kind of an ultimate optimist, but 75% chance are pretty big odds. It happened to us 3 times. We had another daughter that passed away and then a son that passed away about 4 years later. So we were blessed to adopt. My twin girls, who just turned 22, were born on Christmas Day. They were a miracle just in themselves. And then our son was born about when the girls were about almost 5. And he was then diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 4 years old. So going through all of that, I never really processed the loss of our biological children because, life got really lifey and I had twins to take care of. And then our son had all these challenges. And so I got lost in the equation there somewhere. And so I ended up having very high anxiety, started having a lot of physical problems because I was not processing my pain properly. And so that manifested in gut health issues and chronic pain, like fibromyalgia type symptoms. I was having panic attacks at one point. And our marriage also suffered. And so my husband was unfaithful at one point in our marriage, and we will be married 27 years this month, fully restored, because we brought Jesus back into the middle of it. But that was even a learning lesson for me because I realized that I didn't love myself. And so how could I love him? How could I give him what he needed if I wasn't giving myself what I needed? And so I just knew that all of these, I did have cancer too. I know sometimes I throw that in there nonchalantly, but I had a tumor that was growing from the inside of my femur bone. So I had 2 major surgeries. So I now have a plate and 7 screws in my leg permanently. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will see me working out all the time. And that is because I come from a perspective of I get to move my body because I was facing amputation of my leg at one point. So I realized what a blessing that is. Yeah. And so, like I said, I know that's a lot of life in a really short amount of time, but that's where I got to, I didn't go through all of these challenges to not help other people. And so I decided that I wanted to write my book, write our family story, and then speak on stages. And so that's where the TEDx came in. And I'm so excited to do this in my hometown. I grew up in Murfreesboro, and my mama's going to be there. I mean, it's going to be incredible. So I'm super excited about it.
I can only imagine that feeling, especially in hometown. How long ago did you publish your book?
It came out July of 2025, just last
Okay.
year.
And when did you decide? Well, do you remember when the seed for I'm going to write a book came to realization?
Yeah, 10 years before I published the book. So that's kind of these things happen that way. I kept hearing it was almost an audible voice, write the book. Right? And I thought, I don't even know what book. Like, I don't understand why I keep hearing this. And for a long time, I knew I wanted to write the book, but I felt like our story wasn't finished. And I don't think any of our stories are ever truly finished. But I felt like there was more to that book that I was supposed to write. And I think I'm supposed to write more books than just this one. I mean, I am a storyteller at heart and I love writing. So, but I think that this book is the one that I needed to publish in order to heal through a lot of those traumas that I had been through.
So when it kind of came to you, it was more so you'd say like a feeling for you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then where did where's the split in the road? When does Christina say, "Okay, enough's enough. I gotta take some action and do something a little bit differently"? When does that happen?
It was actually when my husband was unfaithful because it really made me take a look at my responsibility in our relationship, and I wasn't holding up my end of the bargain. And so it turned me inward, and I realized that I was so unhappy. And I lived so disassociated for so long. And before, when somebody would say disassociated, like, I didn't even realize what that meant. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's so strange because now that I am fully present and I do trust my body and the feelings that I get, I realized that it was almost like an out of body experience. It was like I was watching myself from the outside looking in, and I didn't have feelings. And that's why I couldn't process them. I didn't even know what a feeling really felt like.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I had depression and I had anxiety, but when you're in a state of fear like that all the time, I mean, you're just running. You're just running from yourself. And then everywhere I ran, well, there I was again. Like can't get away from you because you're right there beside yourself. So, yeah, it was just so strange to live like that for so long, and I regret it because I have so many memories that are just gone, big chunks of my life that I don't have any recollection of. And part of that is my children's childhood. And so, I mean, I try not to have regrets in life, but that is one that I do have because those are times that I can't get back with them because now they're so much older.
Yeah. Well, and I think when and sharing your lens from sharing from my experience in trauma and such, like we do get it is definitely a common thread, and we again like I also 100% relate and notice like an algorithm or pattern in until we have the discovery, we don't realize we being trauma survivors, we don't realize how dissociated we're living until we finally have the realization. And going back to that core message of yours that like this like creates our purpose, like that ability when we were it was survival. It got us through because like these are not things we're supposed to experience intimately as a human. So like, it got us through. We were doing it, said by me too much, but like the gift now is like we are able to go there very easily under high stress situations in which we can really just take in everything logically and see the big picture. What would you say about that and like your experiences of that as a gift?
Yeah, I do see it as a gift now, which is so strange for me to say. But I mean, I don't think you can, there's always two sides of the coin, right?
Always.
You have to live in that place of darkness in order to realize what the light even looks like. I mean, it's just, it really, I was just trying to think how to put that into words. And I'm usually not at a loss for words, but um, it makes me emotional. You know what I mean? Because I do a lot of like inner child work now, and I see myself a lot as like a 5-year old or a 12-year old. I think 12 is where I lived for a really long time. And so I felt like a child. Every situation that I was in, I felt like I was a preteen and didn't know anything about anything and shouldn't have an opinion. And what was, who am I to tell anybody anything, or who am I to say anything profound, or who, it was always that who am I question that came to me, but it was because I was so stuck in that 12-year-old little girl who was terrified of her father. And he wasn't physically abusive, but sometimes I think mental abuse is worse
Mm.
because his voice was always in my head. I didn't even know that I had one, so, because his was all that I heard. That wasn't good enough. Why didn't you do better? Why can't you be like this person? It was, and I forgave him. He's not with us anymore. He passed away a few years ago, and he was so unhappy. And so that I came to another realization, and it was actually when I was holding my 2-day old daughter, and she was, trying to pass away, and my dad was there, and he apologized to me for the first time ever in my life, and he never apologized to me again. But in that moment, he apologized to me because he felt like he was Catholic, and he always talked about the sins of the father. And so he apologized to me because he thought that the loss of my child and the sickness of my child was because of the bad things that he had done in his life. And it was kind of at that point where I said to myself, like, I don't need his approval anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I only need my father in heaven's approval. And so that was like, I think the biggest turning point for me. And I realized that a lot of people don't get that kind of perspective, and I don't necessarily wish that kind of perspective on other people, but I see that as a blessing now. So,
I'm a, we're just opinions here. I'm a firm believer in that. There's several psychological beliefs in the idea that our life begins when I jokingly say sometimes I help entrepreneurs fire their parents. When we no longer need the approval of our parents, we unconsciously need the approval of our parents so desperately, and we don't realize it so far away in life. When we really sever that, like, autonomy and agency really begins, and love and honor your parents. Love and honor them is not needing their approval. So I commend you, and I'm of the belief that that's something powerful we get to go through if we make it that far in our journey. I wanted to ask you a question. Let's see. So what does your journey look like? So in that time when the split in the road, Christina says, okay, I'm living differently. Where does that go? What does that start to look like for you?
it started as a kind of, it's funny. It was a self-development journey, I guess, but it kind of looked like an entrepreneurial journey. And, my husband and I got into a multi-level marketing company. But one of the things that I loved about MLMs is that they were so self-development focused. Like, that was really their core message. It wasn't, here, sell this product and make lots of money. It was learn who you are so that you can help other people learn who they are, and then you can help them. You make money, they make money, like, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where we started, was in MLMs. And then I just started getting in the room. I mean, we started going to conferences, and I didn't start listening to podcasts. I'm trying to think, probably until about 2 years ago. But I've been to so like unlimited amount of rooms that I've gotten in, and listened to these speakers, and their stories and what they've been through. And then a couple years ago, I found Ed Milet, which I'm sure you know who that is,
Mhm.
and was obsessed with Ed Milet. And I was listening to his podcast one day, and he had a lady on there named Amberly Lago. And I was so drawn to her. She was in a motorcycle accident, ended up having 34 surgeries to save her leg. So I resonated with her because of the leg injury, obviously, but she is just such a bright light. And I knew that you know how when you hear somebody speak or you see them on television, and for some reason you like have this weird notion that I'm gonna know that person, like I'm gonna be friends with that person.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was the feeling that I had with Amberly. And at that time, I thought, who am I? Because I was a nobody and I just had this dream of writing a book. She's also an author and a speaker. And so essentially, I joined her mastermind, and she's my coach. But now she's so much more than that. I mean, she is a friend and a mentor. And over the past year and a half, I mean, she has been instrumental in changing my life. I mean, I can't, say how grateful I am for her. But I think that's why people like you are so important as a coach. You've got to have a mentor and a coach, somebody who's walked that journey before you and is where you want to be. And like we said, not our stories are never done, but you still need to find a group of people, a community that has your same ideas and goals and aspirations and integrity. And that's why I just love community and connection. So,
Well,
but
someone right now is listening to the Power and the Pain podcast, and they're connecting with you right now in just the same way. And for those that, speaking of which, and finding community and leadership and tribe, as your journey evolved, you're now, I mean, a leader and sharing with other people and really helping through people curate their messages, their speech, their really what they have to say. I mean, even books. I mean, I know you got into really your niche really now is into being a writing coach. Is that correct?
yeah, so funny story. Speaking of my coach, Amberly Lago, so I started talking about this was at the probably third quarter last year. I started talking about wanting to help people write their story, like to be a developmental editor, because I had one of those when I was writing my book. And the funny part was is that they didn't really have to change much of my book. And so I thought, well, I'm good at this. Like I finally owned it and said, I'm really good at this. And so I wanted to help other people do that. And so I started talking to Amberly about, well, I want to be a developmental editor, and then then I could help them develop their book and do the editing part, and then I could push them to my publisher. And so she said, because the coach she is, well, why can't you just open your own publishing company? And I went, oh, I never even thought of that. So I did open my own publishing company. I am working with clients right now, and I'm actually working on a project I'm really, really proud of and really excited to be a part of. It's a group of spinal cord injury. It's a community of people who all have spinal cord injuries, and they have a nonprofit. And the founder of the nonprofit wants to develop this book in order to give it to other people who have acute injuries, because he goes into the hospital after they've just been injured to give them hope and to
Mm,
show them that they can still have a full life. And so I'm in the process right now of interviewing like 14
hmm.
of this group of people. And so anyway, but I realized that the publishing part is not what I'm in love with. It's the development of the story and the writing and the telling of the story. So I'm going to finish out these few projects that I have, and then I'm going to pivot into just being a writing coach or a developmental editor.
Yeah, really helping people extract and tell their story. And it's so we humans, us humans, we we lived our story. We're intimate with it, but it's really actually hard to even tell our story. Like to put it. Okay, we're back. To
And
package it to package it in a way like when we tell our story, we just all we know is like, oh, this thing happened here, this thing happened here. Even like when we talking about speeches or brand messages or alignment on like offers and things of that nature, we just, again, us humans, we like, oh, this and this and this, and we just like idea dump. It is magical. I'm speaking just from experience when you can have that person and like that's their algorithm, that's their thing, that's their magic. When they're like, they just sit there and take it all in and they're like, okay, here's what I heard you to say, all organized. And you're like, what? So
Yes,
that's your gift.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, good, good.
Yeah.
Now, what do you see next as of right now after your TEDx? Where do things go in the next maybe 5 or 10 years?
Well, let's talk about how we met because that's going to be my next project. So I went to Murfreesboro, kind of a threefold. I went to see my mama because she lives there in Murfreesboro, but I was also having a meeting with the TEDx curator, and then I was going to an event in Nashville. One of my friends was speaking there, and so I came to Murfreesboro, and the TEDx curator said, "Well, I'm starting a podcast. Do you want to be my first interview?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that'd be so cool. I'm honored." And so we went to Spread the Positive, and we did our little podcast. And before we started, the TEDx curator was having a meeting with the owner of Spread the Positive, and so he sent me out into the hallway, and there was this lovely lady sitting out there, and I talked her ear off about all things of what I was doing, and gave her a copy of my book, and she was actually dealing with some forgiveness, struggles, and so I told her the story of my dad, and we bonded on that, and then she said, "I've got to connect you with my friend Greg." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so we get connected, and I thought, and I've been telling this story out in the community, and I'm like, we are very like a weird match. You know what I mean? It's like he's like this big burly guy with a beard and like ex-military, and I'm like, I am not that, as you can clearly see. I said, but we have the same love of storytelling and healing through trauma, and his story is amazing. And so you asked me if I wanted to start a nonprofit.
Let's go.
Yeah, grounded in storytelling, but really rooted in healing childhood trauma. And so that is on the horizon. And I've already reached out to an attorney and a psychologist and a CPA to be on the board. And anybody else out there listening, if you think you want to be a part of this, certainly get in touch with us. But I'm super excited about the mission and the vision. And so I'm just really grateful to you and to Katie that connected us. So
yeah, it's and it's always everything. I have my little sayings that I collected along the way. Everything's always exactly as it's supposed to be, and I believe that I like the way I quantify this in my mind. Like I'm of the belief we have free will. And then everything is always exactly as it's supposed to be. And then we can look at like, is there contradiction in those two statements, and how I balance them is at any given time we are infinite and could go any direction, but every direction has already been blessed. So whichever direction we go is exactly the way it's supposed to be. But we have the choice to pick any of the infinite. With that being said, just how everything aligns and how we met and getting this mission off the ground to serve so many people, it's just I'm just amazed and in gratitude every day as these like things line up, if you will.
well, I know I had told you that probably a year and a half ago I started saying I want to start a nonprofit, and I didn't even have any idea what that meant or what it looked like or how to do it, like
Yeah.
and but I think that there's real truth, and when you speak something into the universe, it says, okay, let's go. And it
Yes.
starts to make the wheels turn and starts to put people in your path. Um, and it's so funny because I do a lot of these podcasts, and so I'm talking a lot, but my TEDx is really about energy
Yeah.
and how your energy and your unspoken communication is really more powerful than any words you could ever say. And I learned that. I'm also an occupational therapist, I went back to school at the age of 39 to get my master's degree in occupational therapy because of our son. I couldn't find anybody else to help him. And so I thought I'm going to have to do this myself to be able to raise him. And the amount of unspoken communication that I have to use with him, but also when I was in the school system and when I was in the clinics with these young kids. I mean, you're talking like pre-K, some kids that weren't old enough to talk, but other kids that were on the spectrum that were non-speaking, that were not able to communicate verbally. And so I learned that I had to be a model. And so most of the time in our sessions, there were no words. I would simply model whatever it was I wanted them to learn or to do, and they would follow me. But I had to be grounded. I had to be calm in order for them to be able to do that. And that's what I tried to teach in the school system because a lot of times the classrooms are just chaotic, and those kids feed off of that because they sort of run on unspoken communication. They run on energy. And so I think we just need to be more aware of the energy that we're putting out into the world because that's what's going to be reflected back to you.
I love that, and I'm so my journey in NLP is in the those world of learnings and things, and my son Xander, he's slightly on the spectrum, and at the time when I'd started NLP, he was I think he was about to be 5, and I share with people like I love like this whole vibe of what you're talking about and this passion of how we're especially our kids and kids in general, but also just in the world. Like I am your mirror, you are mine. But I tell this story like Xander when he was, he's about to be 5, and like this is real early in my journey, and I was like really just experimenting a little bit, like let me try communicating differently. And I tell people this story often, and most people are like, oh, okay, but they don't. It's hard to grasp the depths. My wife had walked past Xander and told him it was dinner time, and she goes to the office and tells me it's dinner time. And I said, okay. And so I tidy up, and it's a moment later, or, maybe 5 minutes later, if that, I walk out and Xander's still playing with his toys. And this is very common. Now, in the past, before I learned to communicate a little bit differently, I would have naturally went with something like, hey, what are you doing? Put your stuff up. Mommy already said it's dinner time. And this would be met with some form of defiancy. To say nonverbal, it probably had volume to it, but it was not a communication. So, and it go back and forth. And I really thought, like my son, the way I knew how to describe it, I'd be like, man, he's so defiant. Well, everything changed like when I started looking at it different. And literally this day, I walk up to him, and I first thing that I did differently, and I was just experimenting. The first thing I did differently was kneel down before I started speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people like I kneel down, but they don't really get the weight of it when I'm telling them. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell them, I kneel down, and I'll say, hey buddy. I said, hey buddy. I lowered my voice.
Mm-hmm.
Hey buddy, it's dinner time. I also didn't make a command. I just made a statement. I said, hey buddy, it's dinner time. He looked at me. I was able to gather his attention, and he said in whatever words he used, I want to go outside. He might have said go outside or outside. And I said, that's awesome. You love going outside. And he went, high five. And then I said, let's go eat dinner. And I turned and I walked off, and he followed me. Yep. When that happened, that was the first, like I was experimenting that day. I'll never forget that day. My wife literally was like, what just happened? And I said to her at the time, I did not explain all the mechanics of what you can understand in that conversation. And so I looked at my wife and I said, it's magic, babe. She kind of chuckled like that.
That gave me chills because that's so beautiful to me, that just that little exchange. And I think that's what people don't understand is that you have to get into their world. And exactly what you said, it's not a command, because my son is very much like that. He doesn't like, and it's almost like they feel like you're talking at them, even though you're having a normal conversation like you would with a typical person, when somebody that's not on the spectrum, but they feel very talked at to, not included. And so it makes them that autonomy that you're always talking about. They feel like they don't have that at all, like they're not able to make any kind of decisions. But it's because their nervous system is on alert all the time. And so, I often say it's hard. That's what I used to tell my husband. I'm like, it's hard to be him. You have got to put yourself in his shoes. Like, it is so hard. All of the things that are coming at him at all times, and for him to tease out one sentence, like, there's no room in there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they feel the lights differently. They can hear the buzzing of, like
Yeah. The fluorescence
the
and stuff.
fluorescent lights. Yeah, they can hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. They can hear so many other things that we just aren't aware of at all times. And most of them, you want to talk about disassociation, they do not have body awareness.
Mm.
It always fascinated with me when I was in the clinic or in the school system and we would have the kids draw a self-portrait. A lot of times what you would see is a big head, huge head. Sometimes it had a face, sometimes it didn't. That was always interesting as well. But then they would just draw arms and legs coming straight out of the head. No torso, no body, because they couldn't feel their body. They didn't even know they had a body.
Yeah.
So that's why so many of them have so much trouble with food, with potty training. Like, if you can't feel, it's interoception. If you can't feel when you have to urinate or you can't feel when you have to poop, like, I mean, it's not your fault.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things I was going to say earlier is all of this education has, what it's really allowed me to do is give myself grace. Because, like you said, my body was in survival mode and it was just trying to keep me safe. And so that's why it disassociated from everything. And so that's what I want other people to realize, like, the way that you have acted in the past or the way that you have responded to different situations, it's not your fault.
Let's
It's
go.
science.
Let's go.
I mean,
I
I
love
mean,
that.
yeah. So,
What would you say on the lines of, because without getting too much into March 12th territory, what would you say on the lines of, now that we're on this topic, I love it. It exists. We can get trained and educated on how to read body language and cues and tonality and all the things under the sun. Cool. But without none of that training, we are already, I'm going to make the suggestion and also pose as a question. I want to hear your feedback on. We are already unconsciously aware and able to pick up on even if we can't consciously speak what it is, we're aware of the other person's body language. Yeah. What can you kind of share insights, thoughts, opinions on that?
yeah, and really, like I said, the kids that I worked with were my biggest teachers because, like, just the tiniest little thing, like somebody's nostrils flare, you know what I mean? Or they swallow really hard. And you can see when somebody tenses up. You know what I mean? Like, you can, because
Hmm.
that was, I could know when my son was going to have a meltdown because his whole body would get tense right before it happened. And then I would know, like, okay, I got to draw back. Like, maybe I needed to move farther away from him because that would make him feel safer. But there's all these little bitty things. And I tried my hardest and my darndest to teach this in the school system. And the poor teachers were just so overwhelmed. You know what I mean? Like, they would have
Hmm.
several kids that were neurodivergent in one
Hmm.
classroom. And so when you're dealing with all of those nervous systems at the same time, they're constantly feeding off each other. And so it's just, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah,
And if
they
you don't,
feed a lot off of energy, a lot.
yes, for sure. And that's what, if you're dysregulated, that's the energy you're putting off. So you're not going to be able to calm them down if you're not calm.
If I'm talking to my wife to this day, Xander's coming up on 11. If I'm in the kitchen talking to my wife and I mean, just excited in a conversation, it could be excited in frustration, excited in happiness, excited a little bit in the conversation, like Xander will get audible and we'll start hearing him moving around in the living room, like literally getting up and moving around, and he's not even sure why, but it's like I'll be like, okay, I gotta calm down. Like I'm feeding him right now.
Yeah, I mean, in one person's energy can change an entire room. I mean, think about if you're in the corporate world, if you're in a boardroom, um, you can probably, this saying is you can cut the tension with a knife. But I mean, that's a real thing. And so you've got to learn. I also had to learn what energy was mine and what energy was other people's.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, and I like sometimes now I sort of envision um, mirrors all around me, kind of like a fun house type of situation. But I sort of envision mirrors all around me to reflect that back out to them so that I'm not picking up everybody else's energy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's why I was so anxious as a child. I'm an empath, and so I was picking up all those energies from every single family member. You know, my dad didn't just yell at me. He was a equal opportunity yeller. He yelled at my mom. He yelled at my sisters. Like he yelled at my friends. Like it was just. And so when you grow up in a household like that, you're feeding on all those other energies, and it's just anxiety all the time. So you want to run. That's why a lot of these kids do flee. I mean, it's a biological reaction. Like
Mm-hmm.
they feel unsafe, so they run.
Yep.
So it's not like you said, it's not that they're being defiant or they're a brat. It's their nervous system trying to keep them from a situation that they feel isn't safe.
Well, and also even going a step left, right, further. Like I suggest to people and love. I want to hear your feedback too. Like if when you go places and you get feelings about the situation, on your journey, you're gonna have to be mindful. Am I projecting that or am I receiving that? That's a journey, and I wouldn't recommend anyone ever think they conquered it. Just always be suspicious of that. But with that, like also trust yourself. Like if the room feels good, like maybe explore it a little bit further. And if the room doesn't feel good, I don't care how long you've been in there. If you ain't made it to your seat yet, maybe go ahead and head out. But allow yourself, like you're picking up on, like even if you're not sure why, if you're going in this room and there's a lot of anxiety or whatever the case may be, you're picking up on these energetic cues on things in the room, even though you can't consciously articulate, oh, that person looks frustrated, these people look tense, but you're picking up on it. What are your thoughts on that?
And it's actually kind of scares me because you think about how much we're in community, especially so my 22-year-old twins, they love music, and so we go to a lot of concerts. You think about the amount of people that are in a stadium and how much energy is in there. I mean, it's just, and I'm in awe of it a lot of times because you think like there's this one person on stage that's singing or playing an instrument or whatever it is that has the attention of hundreds of thousands of people, like the magnitude of that. You know what I mean? Like the power of that, to have a captive audience.
Yeah. I don't even know what to even think of that as, because I mean it's got to be incredible. I mean the person on the stage has got to feel amazing, but even outside of that, like that energy is just being released everywhere and every which way at that time, and that's a lot being produced. Energy is a weird thing. Weird. I don't know. That was a word that I felt called
It
to
is
use.
weird.
Okay, it's a weird thing. And like I tell people because some people are a little. They get you start talking about energy, and it's like, what? How do you mean? Okay, well, once upon a time, someone was trying to convince the other people that the moon was moving the ocean 4 times a day, which is the two tides going in and out, in and out. We now know that to be so with energy. So that's how I kind of quantify it for people that are curious what we're talking about. For the listeners curious, like what are we talking about? This energy from the stadium, similar to the
Well,
energy
and
causing the
yeah,
tides.
I used to worry about talking about energy just because I am a Christian. And so, I mean, I'm a true believer in God. I love Jesus. He is my best friend. And so sometimes when you start talking about energy, quote unquote, people can think that it's not of the Christian standpoint. But I mean, God is literally energy.
Right,
Like, I mean, he created everything with his energy.
right,
Like,
right.
that's what we were born from. So I think that's just how I try to look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same. I wanted to. I remember earlier there was something I had, and it spun around, then it popped back. So it was supposed to be on this podcast. I love. I talk about. I'm a big believer. All, in my opinion, all trauma is relative. So like whatever it is for that person, like the weight is relative. And with that being said, in my it's something that when you had spoke earlier is what clicked for me. I had some physical abuse and psychological abuse, and it's all relative in the end. But for me personally, I can deeply relate with you. In I tell people like the psychological for me as an individual, the psychological was much worse than the physical trauma, and there was some pretty graphic physical trauma. I can't remember what that pain actually felt like. I can't forget the words that were said to me though.
Mhm.
So I was just really that was huge when you talked about that psychological aspect. Again, in the end, I believe it's all relative in the end. But for me, the things that were said in the not just to me, around me, about other people, can things. I tell the example all the time. Like when I was younger, the way other people were talked about, like all the way into adulthood, I didn't get a little electric toothbrush because that meant I would be lazy.
Oh, wow.
And now I have one, and like a couple months back I picked it up and I was like and the battery stopped working and I was like, oh cool. And then halfway through brushing my teeth I was like, dang, my arm hurts and I'm not even being as efficient. I literally, this is real, and literally that day it hit me. I was like, holy crap, I lived so many years of my life, decades, like literally thinking that it would mean I was lazy if I did that. Well, that was like part of that psychological conditioning that was taking place. And
Yeah, it's crazy to me to think, because my husband, for example, I think somewhere along the line he's got stuck as a 12-year-old boy as well, because a lot of the times I will feel like I'm having a conversation with a 12-year-old boy. He gets very defensive and very, you don't talk about heightened, you know what I mean? And he's not a yeller. He's very even keel, like very, very, I think I married the opposite of what my dad was. But somewhere along the line, somebody told him or made him feel that he was stupid. He had, and he's not dyslexic or anything, but he had a lot of trouble reading. Like he just didn't retain what he read. And so he remembered having to read out loud in class. And we have talked about this but he remembered having to read out loud in class, and he read a sentence twice because that's just kind of how, he had
mm-hmm,
trouble with that.
mm-hmm,
And the kids laughed. And so now when it comes to, like, he always says, well, I'm not a reader, or I'm not, and then you start telling yourself these stories about yourself that aren't necessarily even true. Like,
yeah,
it's just because somebody laughed at you one time and then you got upset, and you remember that feeling. That's what your body remembers, and your body says, I don't want to feel like that again. And so that came after I read. I'm not a reader. I don't want to read. So
yeah.
yeah, it's just amazing to me how
It's
you
huge, and
can't.
those stories we tell ourselves, they become, we don't realize it, And for the listeners, like, listen, like I'm only where I'm at on my journey. We don't realize those stories become decisions for ourselves. So like if I were to say I'm not a good learner, well, at what point in time, like how many times do I need to say it before it's a choice to not to start learning? And this blew my mind one time. I was going through a training and I heard someone say, they literally said, oh, I'm not good at learning. I have a hard time learning. And the person asked them, they said, well, I won't be able to help you until you change that decision. And I was like, what just happened? I was like, wait, what? What do you mean change that decision? They're not good at learning. They're like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, as long as you stay there, I believe you. But if today you want to start being good at learning, then I'll start helping you. But no longer can you not be good at learning. Now you are becoming good at learning.
Yeah, I've said for years that, because I look for miracles. Like, I'm always looking for a miracle, and I've had so many miracles in my life, but you're gonna find what you look for.
I'm chuckling. Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes.
mean, that's just the bottom line. So whether you're looking to find despair and poverty, and I mean, if you're looking for it, that's what you're going to find. And so I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm happy-go-lucky all the time. I mean, I have my moments, but I think if you're looking for miracles, you're definitely more bound to find a miracle than you are anything else.
Yeah,
So I try to do
absolutely.
that every day.
Look for it every day, and find the anchors for the listeners. Find what your anchor is. There's no set one, or I would have wrote the book and made sure that I was the millionaire, billionaire by now. But find your anchors. Like, life is in session. That's another one of my little sayings that I have. Like, life is in session. Find your anchors that, like, when I pass this, this is a checkpoint. When I pass this checkpoint, I realign back to looking for my blessings. And if we set these checkpoints daily and we pass these checkpoints and we just keep reorientating, I mean, again, going back to the scientific side of it, our reticular activating system is going to find evidence for our blessings.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of that, I use nature. I try to get outside. I mean, especially if I'm in my head or I'm struggling with something. I'm like, okay, I just got to walk out into the sunshine, or I got to take a walk, or I got, even 5 seconds out there, just feel the wind on your face, whatever it is. It's just sort of a reset. So I use nature a lot.
Yeah. Do you, I forget if I don't know if we've mentioned before, are you like a water person?
So that's funny. I didn't used to be a water person, but my husband would live on a houseboat if
If you let him.
if I let him, he would live on a houseboat. He wants to be on the water or by the water all the time, and it was always a thing. Like, 'cause he's a big fisherman, and so he wanted me to go fishing with him, and I never wanted to go. But I feel like maybe something happened to me as a kid or somewhere, I don't know, that something with water that made me sort of afraid of it. And now that I've done all of this internal work, like now I crave water, or you know what I mean? And I didn't even want to go outside before I did all this work. And now I crave being in nature. Like
Wow.
it grounds me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've said 1,000 times, like, the world, and I know this sounds strange, or cliche maybe, but it's like I have brand new eyes, really. Like, the colors are brighter, the sun, the moon is fuller, the trees are full. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just, it's like I'm a whole new person. So
That's beautiful.
go on the journey.
Let's go on the journey.
Go
It's
on the
so
journey.
worth it. Like, it only seems scary in the beginning. Once you get going every time, and like, that's my mission in this podcast. Like, I want to share enough stories. What's enough? Well, if I get somewhere around 8.2 billion, that'll be enough stories. I want to share enough stories that people realize that, like, man, it can be anything: hard, scary, tough, messy, whatever. Only in the beginning, like, very quickly momentum catches, and you realize, because in the beginning we think, oh my God, it's going to be such a long journey. It took 10 years for that person. Da, 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 da. What we don't realize is, like, momentum kicks in so friggin' fast, and there's no end to this journey other than when our time runs out. So I love it. Go on the journey. You got me excited there. Christina, what's the best way for listeners that want to reach out to you, connect with you, follow you, get your content, especially around curating their brand message, speech? I know before we even hopped on, you had mentioned a little bit, you've even been in the world of working with people, helping curate and craft their TEDx speech as well. If for people that want to connect with you, learn more about you, or like, hey, like, I need to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm all over Instagram at Christina P. Simmons, and there's no H in Christina. My name is spelled, so it's Christina. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. My website is christinapsimmons.com. So all of my links and all of that is there. And I mean, I can, my email, all that's on there. So
Sweet.
yeah.
And then if you're watching our video, awesome. And for those that are just listening, maybe in their car, maybe you're working out, whatever the case may be. Again, it's Christina, Christina, P as in Papa, and then Simmons, Simmons, and then all your social media platforms. And Christina, now, Christina, real quick, the website, was that christinapsimmons.com?
Yep.
Beautiful. christinapsimmons.com. Christina, before we pop out of here, I'll give you a minute here in just a moment. I'm going to ask you for just a final thought, final message to the listeners. And I'll give you a moment to kind of process. This message, whatever you have to share, is going to be for our listeners. I want this message to be for someone that they're like right on the cusp of starting their journey. So like they've caught the bug. What can you share with them? They're listening today.
Embrace your fear, first of all. And I think I lived in fear for so long, and there does come a moment, kind of a switch, where you're like, forget this. Like, I don't want to live this way anymore. So if you're feeling that way, that means you're ready to go. You're ready to go on the journey. You're ready to face all the scary parts and know that your past is in your past. It can't hurt you anymore. So you can only move forward.
Thank you, Christina, for being on. For our listeners, make sure you stay tuned for Christina's first TEDx speech, TEDx Murfreesboro, March 12th. Make sure you like and subscribe, tell your friends about the episode, and we'll catch you next week.
If this hit you deep, trust that.
Your pain has power, and your story isn't over.
Follow, share, and send this to someone who you think might benefit.
I'm Greg, and this was The Power in the Pain. Keep stepping into your power.